being forgetful, we expect our elders to be forgetful.
Right.
But where does it cross over? Is it somewhat subjective where there could be an answer, or it's, hey, wait, that's beyond forgetful? Like or is it the fact that if you're forgetting, almost like if it becomes a problem or you're starting to put yourself in danger, then it changes over to cognitive decline, or what is the line?
So it's a lot of information in this area, and here are just some of the red flags that you can look for. Forgetfulness is normal. There's a lot of aspects of normal aging that fall into, let's say, a category to your left. And then to your right, you've got cognitive decline. You've got that Venn diagram where you've got the common areas in the middle. So let's take the forgetfulness. If you forget a routine or your keys, or you're getting dressed in the morning, you might have forgotten to put that clip in your hair that you do every day. That's okay. That's probably normal aging. When it starts to affect the regular ability for your day to function normally, then you're moving into an area where it may be something else. For example, if you're getting ready in the morning and you are trying to brush your teeth, and you brush your teeth, but you don't put toothpaste on your toothbrush. So that could be a red flag. If you're getting dressed and your sequencing is out of order, so you put your shirt and your pants on and your jacket, but as you step out of your bedroom, your wife may say, wait, you forgot to put your shirt on over your t-shirt. And you're thinking, oh, but I did this. See, those are types of things that affect the regular flow of your day.
Regular flow.
But forgetfulness is more than just a routine. For example, Wes, I met you today for the first time. Now I meet a lot of people in my day-to-day.
I feel like a test is coming up.
A big test is coming up. So we're out at a bar in Buckhead, and you walk over, and you walk by, and I say, hey, Wes. And you look at me, and I know that you're not old yet, Wes. But you go, okay, wait.
Right.
I know her from somewhere, and you're sitting there going, you're talking and being, personable. And then you walk away, and you go, oh, wait, that was Ann. She was in my studio today. Okay. That's normal, okay? But if you walk past me in that bar and I'll say, Wes, and you look at me and you'll say, yes, and you can't place me. It's not that you forgot where you know me from. I just don't exist in your mind anymore. And there's a reason for that. And I'm going to explain that to your audience.
So that gets into real cognitive decline. Part of it is it that we don't. First of all, it's so sad. Number one, when families go through this, it's one of the most sad things to see.
Yes,
it's slow moving, which makes it really difficult. And then this is the other thing that I've noticed over the years, because I've been in the financial industry for 20 some years. My parents are still, they're in their, let's call it late 60s, early 70s, and there's nothing that I'm seeing. So I don't see it within my own family yet. But with my client base, that maybe they started with me when they were 60 and now they're in their 80s. It's hard sometimes, and I've had a few families go through this. Sometimes it feels like things are great, and then all of a sudden there's one big red flag, and that I think is so. What you just described is that somebody can sound normal, act normal, and make good excuses like, oh, well, I didn't check that. Everything seems okay. But then one big thing is like, whoa, wait a minute. So is that one big thing that's like a red flag that maybe now that crosses over into decline?
Well, what my goal is, my passion is, if I can teach your audience, if I can teach your client base, your friends, you, what to look for, then there shouldn't be that one big major traumatic event.
Let's get to that then.
So you should be seeing these red flags. So let's say the forgetfulness is fine. Okay, that's something. A break in their routine, like I said, the toothbrush thing. Let's talk about the finances. This is a big red flag. When we teach banks, administrators and banks, tellers, we educate them as well. Why? Because Generally, the older population will go to a bank and they'll
In
do things in
person.
person.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So the tellers often see these clients more than the doctors do. A doctor will see his patients maybe once or twice a year for 5 or 10 minutes. But these
But a bank teller may see somebody every
once
week.
a week.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Huh.
So now they're starting to see them do things that aren't quite right. Like, for example, they can tell that bills are not being paid on time, or they're transferring funds to an organization that they've never done that before. These are red flags that are real important, because I had a family call me last week, and the daughter was sitting down, and I said, so what kind of things are you seeing changes? And the very first thing the son-in-law said, well, so I noticed that there was a stack of bills that I thought had been paid. 3 months behind. She says she's paid them. She doesn't remember not paying them, but they're not paid. And now I'm going to have to go back there and see if there's anything else that hasn't been paid. So these type of things are usually one of the first red flags, the financial piece of not remembering, not being able to manage the day-to-day tasks that you've been managing all your life. That is a huge red flag for families to recognize. For you, as somebody who works with clients for over a number of years, to start to recognize. If you're sitting at a meeting and you're talking to someone and you're discussing some options for them to make, and they've always been very astute in their ability to understand.
To quickly understand and make a decision.
And to make a decision. And now all of a sudden not only are they not able to make a decision, they might quickly make a decision that doesn't make any sense at all. And you find yourself thinking, well, maybe I didn't explain that in the best way. So let me go back. So when you start seeing that at the next couple of meetings, that's a huge red sign.
But you mentioned something about your mother where she stopped wanting to eat, let's say, with the family. Something like that, where you can easily say, well, she's just sick of 7 kids running around. Like, give her a break.
In my family, yes.
Or somebody that says, I'd rather not drive. I can't get on the highway. Again, I don't, I get that. If I'm my mother-in-law, who's 71, totally with it, she won't drive. Right. But maybe to your point, this is somebody who would have no problem driving, and all of a sudden says, "Oh, I don't want to get on the highway anymore." So so it does take a long time, first of all, and second of all, it starts to impede their life, and that's kind of that's when the flag goes from normal aging, to your point, to something in that maybe it's also in the Venn diagram piece in the middle that is. Actually, that's cognitive decline. That's a problem.
It is. So this whole idea of maybe not being as social as your parents used to be. Like, say you always went out to Sunday dinner together, and now all of a sudden mom and dad don't want to go anymore. So that crosses into understanding the disease itself and what it actually does to that person. But instead of going to those details, let me explain why they may be drawing back.
Yeah, why?
Because,
and by the way, real quick, the umbrella you're talking about is cognitive decline in general has a lot of different. There's a lot of different names.
Absolutely. So one of the first things I do when I'm teaching or doing a presentation is I say, show of hands, who thinks dementia is a medical diagnosis? So half the hands usually pop up in the room, and then the other people are like, no, I don't know if I want to raise my hand or not. Right? Well, it's not. Dementia is not a medical diagnosis. And people are like, oh, what? Dementia is an umbrella term that covers over 70 different types of diagnosis of cognitive decline.
So dementia
over 70 diagnosable.
Give me some examples, because I want to I'm not going to forget going back to
so I'm going to
piece.
say the top 4 that people are most familiar with, obviously, number 1, Alzheimer's. That probably affects 40, 50, 60% of the population that has cognitive decline. Okay, next, vascular dementia, what my mother experienced. Next will be Lewy body dementia, and we'll have to end with frontal temporal. So those are the 4 most common that the general population, if they've heard of any of these, will have heard of. But you've got 66 more possibilities there. You've got
so there's a lot that people have never heard of.
Right. And then you've got like Parkinson's-induced dementia, alcohol-induced dementia. You've got, all kinds of diseases that have dementia as a side effect or symptom as well. So you've got all kinds of areas of the brain that are affected by this. And this is a disease of the brain. And generally, I go on to say there are different ways of diagnosing it, but
By the way, these are the medical diagnoses.
Those are the medical diagnoses. But what people don't understand is the brain literally starts to shrink in size.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the determining factor in people having to, live with this limited capacity. People think, oh, dementia is just forgetfulness, but it is so much more than I have forgotten your name. It is because the capacity of the brain is decreasing. If you consider the brain as the mechanism that controls the entire body, every function of the body, and then you take components of your brain out, if you took parts of your car out,
it's not just one thing that goes wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a chain reaction.
Absolutely. So let's take the whole idea of why is mom and dad not going out to dinner with me anymore? Okay, well, so dementia, cognitive decline affects the hearing. No, we're not talking about your hearing diminishes and you start hearing less. Yes, that can happen. But what happens is it affects your ability to monitor and to filter the noises. So all of a sudden your hearing is almost heightened. What does that mean? That means, well, all the noises that come in at a restaurant, the people talking next to you, the guy bussing the table, the guy setting the plate down in front of you and picking up the silverware that you've already used, all of those noises come at you at the same volume. And your mind can't filter through that. And if you haven't heard that hitting you all at once, you can't understand the anxiety it causes. I perform this this opportunity. I say opportunity because I think it's a great opportunity for people to walk in the shoes of somebody with dementia for about 10 minutes. And what I do is I impair them visually, I impair their hearing, and I impair their fine motor skills. And the way I impair their hearing is I put a set of noise-canceling headsets on them. And then through that, I shoot like 10 different types of day-to-day sounds all at once at the same volume. Now,
so it's disorienting.
It's so disorienting. So people go through this exercise and they go through, like, say, an apartment, and I will tell them different things to do that you would do on a daily basis. Feed the dog, fold the sheets, hang your shirt up, pick up the cards that are on the floor, okay?
I can tell you're a mom of 7, by the way.
Oh, really? Well, I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but I'm going to take it as
I've got
one.
4. So
Okay. So in this process, yes, people struggle with the fine motor part of that because they have these mechanisms on their hands. They struggle with the visual part of that because I have, visual impairment. But what gets everybody the most is the hearing. It literally,
like
some people, it is so much on their brains. You're hearing sirens and you're hearing TV and you're hearing somebody talking and a dog barking and a doorbell ringing, that people have taken those headsets off before that time, 10 minutes is up, and they set them down and they're shaking. And the people that have loved ones that are going through cognitive decline 100% of the time say, I had no idea that this is what they were hearing every day. I had no idea. So if you take that person with any type of dementia and you put them in a setting like a restaurant or just a family table where they're listening to 2 conversations and forks clinking and people sipping and maybe music or TV in the background, it's overwhelming. It is so much on their senses that it is overwhelming. So yeah, they're not going to want to go out with tea. My mother didn't want to sit at the table with my children talking about 10 different things at one time, with a cat.
So it gets heavy for them to deal with.
So heavy.
So again, literally noise is part of the issue.
Well, noise, but that's only part of it. The other part is they're aware. So another characteristic or a symptom of cognitive decline.
They're aware that they're declining.
They're aware that now it is a little more difficult to keep up with that conversation. It's a little more difficult to respond. My mother, I look back and I see all these red flags. My mother would go to a restaurant and she was very particular about what she enjoyed eating, and food was something she enjoyed, even though she was 110 pounds and fit as a fiddle. She could out-eat my 6-foot sons all day long. I mean, they were always in awe of how much food that woman could put away. But we started noticing I would take her to restaurants with us, and she would look at the menu for a few minutes and put it down and say, just order me something. And I'd say, well, what do you want, Mom? I would think, well, she doesn't want to look. And she'd say, well, just order me something. So I'd say, well, you want fish, chicken, meat, what is it? Then she digressed even more to where she didn't even look at the menu. And she didn't have a preference. And I didn't understand that, but I do now. See, when
would a kid, let's say you're a 10-year-old, when would a 10-year-old or let's say a 12-year-old start to notice this, or it's not noticeable enough for a long time? To, let's say, a kid, one of your kids. Did any of your kids ever speak up and say, there's something wrong with Grandma?
Well, they didn't know there was something wrong. They knew there were changes. Yeah. And they just went along with it. To them, it was just their loving Grandma. And, all of us are owed to kids, right? So they categorize anything like 30 and up as just old behavior.
Totally
right?
old. Yeah.
So kids aren't going to go, oh, wow, that's like an even older behavior than what Mom was used to doing. And so, right. But they just were always... Since she had always been around us and we had always assisted her, whatever assistance she needed is what they gave her.
So how do we start to talk then to our family members when this starts to happen and we want to say, do we need to go to the doctor? Do we need to do something? You should take Mom to the doctor, or we should take Mom. Or what do we do with families we work with? So again, the bank teller. How do you start? What do we do?
That's a tough one because you've got all different dynamics represented in families, as I'm sure you do with your clients as well. So you've got those who are ahead of the game, who recognize that, like say, a spouse may be changing and they want to be proactive. And with this disease, the sooner you diagnose it, the sooner you can do exercises and things cognitively slow it down. Some meds may slow it down. There are things you can actually do.
I mean, that's the first thing when you start to really understand the gravity of a disease like this. And again, I've talked about this so many times, but no one's ever brought this hearing issue up. And now I totally get it. I can feel how heavy that is. Immediately, the first thing you think is that how the hell do we slow this thing down? Do we, again, I'm a markets guy, so I'll look at, Eli Lilly will come out with something, or, this trial didn't work and there's promise in this trial, but we still don't have anything close to a silver bullet, like at all.
Right.
Is there anything that you've seen over the years that does start to either slow things down or make things even better? Or is it literally just downhill no matter what we do?
Wow. So if you ask me what's my wish, if I had one wish I could make for families that are going through this would be it right here. If I could convince families to get an early diagnosis when they first start thinking there's a change, so go to the doctor. So the diagnosis can either be, this is okay right now, or no, we think there's a problem. Because then you can actually start making a change. You can start becoming more routine.
But what kind of doctor do we go to?
Well, I always say go to a neurologist. Go to somebody that has got geriatric training, a gerontologist, a geriatric specialist. Those are the ones who get down to the nitty gritty. Most people start with their PCP, their internist. And, no offense to internists, that a lot of them are trained well, but this is still a new field. It's been with us for a long time, but gosh, the field of gerontology is growing. 8 years ago, there were 44 maybe in Atlanta, in Georgia. So it's a growing field. The population demands it.
Today?
I'm not sure, but I know the numbers are so vastly different because just finding gerontologists to go and see became an issue. Well, pediatricians, I'm sure there's a time in the history of pediatrics where people thought, why should I take my child to a different doctor than our family med, right?
Early on, yeah.
Yeah, but now who wouldn't go to a pediatrician? Because they know that meds interact differently. They know that even diseases have different symptoms and show differently in children than they do in a fully developed body. Well, the same thing happens on the other end. As we age, meds affect us differently. They interact differently. Different diseases show differently.
So again, if you had your wish.
Here's my wish, right. So I would tell families to get a diagnosis early. And then make sure that you establish that socialization and because here's what happens. People start seeing a change, right? Like Wes, what is your wife's name?
Lynn.
Okay, Wes and Lynn go out every Saturday night with their best friends. They go and they have dinners at each other's homes, right? And now Wes and Lynn are not showing up at those events regularly, and all of a sudden they've dropped out of the group. Why? Because Wes is starting to experience some changes. He's not able to follow the conversations. When they play games, he's not as quick as he used to be. And he's a little embarrassed. And he tells Lynn, and Lynn overcompensates for Wes. She says, well, I know Wes is embarrassed and I don't want to draw any light to this. So we're going to not be quite as visible in our group. So other people don't pick up on this. Well, that is the number one thing that happens that is wrong. To withdraw socially, to have less stimulation and less interaction because you are not as able to comprehend or interact as quickly as well
So
as
that
you used to.
actually,
It's detrimental.
really?
That is my wish list. So
Huh.
couples become less social, and then the spouse starts overcompensating for the shortcomings of
the other spouse.
of the disease.
Yeah.
Or adult children do the same thing.
Like you did with your mom in the beginning.
Exactly
Oh,
what I
she's
did with
fine.
my mom.
Oh, you were going to
She's
take a
fine.
left. Yeah.
I'm just going to do her meds for her. I'm going to cook all her meals for her, and I'm going to make sure she's taken care of. Instead of going, wait, why did this happen? Why did she burn this again? And why was she standing under the middle of that light? That doesn't make sense at all.
And I guess, Ann, we could go a long time covering that up, can't we?
Oh, of course, and people think, you said this, and I wanted to say, well, that's not always correct, Wes. You said until all of a sudden the disease appears, and it seems huge, but it's not. If you were willing to get a diagnosis early, if you were willing to take the necessary steps to slow this down, then you would see how it digresses in a slow pattern. And the disease, the different types of dementia, hit different variables of speed, and they progress individually differently. And also with the individual person. A lot depends on the health, the nutrition, how hydrated they are, how well they're taking their meds. So it's all an individual race that these people are running here.
So things can be help. There is help.
There is hope.
It can go from, and I don't know if there's any sort of standard, but if things go, what is the typical pattern of decline? How quickly does it go from barely noticeable to terrible? Or is there just what if we were to draw a bell curve?
I'm sure there's an area where you're going to have the majority of the people who are similar. But, I see cases where I saw a family 2 weeks ago where the husband was diagnosed 2 months ago. And he's almost in a place where he's physically and cognitively unable to care for himself. The decline was in 2 months. He had Lewy body, and it just hit him very hard. But
again, some of these take years instead of months, right?
Yeah. So typically, we see families in our communities that start to ask questions when the caregiver cannot care for that loved one anymore, whether it's an adult child, whether it's a spouse, and that person is in a state where they are needing a lot of assistance, prompting, help addressing, direction, and yet that loved one, that family member has been dealing with this for 2 to 3 years. And they probably have not been aggressively interacting to try to slow it down.
But here's the other thing I think our audience is sitting here as they're listening, and you think, if it's mom or if it's uncle or if it's friend, if it's someone that you're close with, it's a weird conversation to have.
Yeah.
That's what seems so difficult to me, is that, and if you, in a professional setting, so I keep going to your bank example, or someone is a client of yours, the end person having the issue, if you're not super close to them, let's go back to the bank example. What right does the bank teller have to say to somebody that they see once a week? Hey, you need to go get help. And then if they do say something, it's almost socially awkward and unacceptable. Number one. Number two, how often are people not receptive to that? Like, no, I'm fine. I'm just old, and I'm getting a little older, and I'm forgetful.
Right.
Like, there's so many barriers
Right.
to get that person. I would suspect, to either have somebody really, really that's much closer to them come step in, or they're finally saying, okay, yeah, let's go to the doctor. That seems hard to overcome.
It is. I wish I had a pat answer that everybody could use in this situation. Again, it is an individual case by case. When I'm talking to a family member, it depends on how receptive that person is. Again, if you've got somebody who's proactive, who is ahead of the game on this, then they are wanting what's best for them and their family members. All the way to you've got, like, say, parents who are still trying to live on their own, who are compensating for each other. I could tell you case by case stories. There's a couple, a son and a daughter who came in to see me and said, look, mom and dad are living in a 3-story house. Dad's already fallen twice. They still drive, but they shouldn't. Mom has cognitive decline. Dad's trying to care for her. Dad has physical issues, disabilities that are keeping him from, he's on a walker now. Again, this situation just looks really bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you and I, looking at it from the outside in, we're going to be like, okay, there's an obvious answer here. They need either some help in the home, or they need to go to an assisted living community where they can get the care so they can live well and healthy, right? They're not even eating meals because they can't cook for each other. So there's a lot of issues here. Nutrition, who's administering the medication, how are they going to see their doctors? That son and that daughter cannot even take the next steps. They cannot even approach mom and dad with this issue.
Don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it.
No. They want to live in the house that they've lived in for the last 40 years. Of course they do.
They want to keep driving. They want to keep.
So how do you have that conversation?
Yeah, what do you do, Ann?
So there are a lot of different ways that they can approach this. One way is they need to sit down and talk to the parent who doesn't have cognitive decline and say, look, we are so concerned about your health and mom's. What is going to happen to mom if you fall? She's got cognitive decline. She's not at a place where she can pick the phone up and make the right kind of phone call to get help. You guys are in this house by yourself. Who is gonna make the next right step happen there? You can talk to and appeal to their sense as parents, as we are up at night.
Worried about you.
We are not doing well because we don't know how to help you and you're not letting us. Appeal to that. But you also end up with parents who will not do anything, or a spouse who says, no, I am fine, until there is that traumatic incident.
Until it really hits a wall, basically.
Guilty. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm guilty of that. And I can sit in front of people and say, look, I did this. I was that person who ignored all the signs because I didn't want to accept the fact that my loved one had a disease, and this is a disease. There is no cure, and it is digressive in nature.
Tell me about your mom, though. What happened with her and over her course of her lifetime?
So we found a community for her. Now, I didn't know assisted living communities existed. I had done some volunteer work in high school in a nursing home. They call those skilled nursing facilities now. And that's all I thought there was. I thought you were in your home and then you went to a skilled nursing facility. And the first time I walked into an assisted living community, I thought, this is like, I don't know, a country club or a resort. I want to live here. Yes. Well, here's what happened to my mom. She obviously came from the hospital, rehab, and went straight into the assisted living community. She went to Arbor Crabapple in Alpharetta. And
which, for those listening, Alpharetta, so Atlanta, like a lot of big cities, has a belt line around it. And then that's kind of in town Atlanta. And then Alpharetta is one of the bigger cities that's slightly north of the main city in Atlanta.
Right, so in the greater metro Atlanta area. But
huge suburb of Atlanta.
Beautiful,
wonderful place.
Great people. Beautiful community. And I literally was so unhappy to put my mother in there. I expected she was going to die. I was that grump that said, this is wrong to my brother, but I understand that I'm not able to care for her because I let something happen to her, right? Listen, daughter guilt is huge. I don't know if mommy guilt is worse or daughter guilt, but I was experiencing both. And so here's what happened, which amazed me. My mother went into this community, and after she got stronger with PT, because they had in-house physical and occupational therapy, she actually got better. So if you were charting her health, she actually got better. And why? See this puzzled look on your face, Wes. It's because she was in a community now that had structured activities, regular structured activities. She was in a community with her peers. Now, how important is that? Not only was she in a community with seniors, okay, her age group, but she was also, there were people at her cognitive levels also. This community was so good at what they did that they were able to tailor the activities to where my mother was. So, and I quite
Very different than 7 kids playing travel sports
with no singers
cello
around.
and piano and
trumpet.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the
Ooh,
trumpet in the house?
you're
Right?
No,
Right. No wonder she left. No.
yeah, no wonder she.
Hide in her room. No, but what was amazing to me, and I give this example. I have 3 boys who play baseball at a high level. They always played on like a majors or a triple A team. So I have one that plays D1 sports. He's a pitcher, and I have one that's a pitcher on a 15-year-old team.
Where does it currently, or this is back then?
No. This is currently.
Where does he play?
My guy that plays in college at Furman University.
Oh, at
he's
Furman.
a senior,
Wow, that's
right?
cool.
And then my little guy here, he started at the New Innovation Academy in Alpharetta. So if I switch those 2 spots and my D1 guy played on the 15-year-olds team, what would happen? It would not challenge him, right? So he would get worse at the game.
Or his increase would slow down.
Well, everything about his skill sets would decrease because he wouldn't be challenged, right? If you take the little guy, 15-year-old, 6-foot guy, and he goes at the D1 level and plays, what happens? It's too much. It's too hard. It's too fast. So he would pull back and withdraw, like I talked about people with cognitive decline doing when they're in a social setting and it's too much. So his skill sets would go away as well. Well, the same thing happens if you're in a social setting or you're in activities and you're not where you're supposed to be. So this community was able to assess my mom and say, hey, this is at the level she needs to be. This will stimulate her. This will challenge her, but it will not overwhelm her. She will want to come back.
And that's
every
where
day.
we want our loved ones to be,
Exactly.
in kind of this right level.
Where they are and able to move them as they digress. So my mother got better. She got active. She was like the 3rd most active resident out of 97 people. She literally ran to activities. They told me she runs from activity to activity. And yet she was in an area that was safe. There were nurses watching her. She was in a secure environment, so she could walk around the garden and get her walking in, but I didn't have to worry about her being under a traffic light. So it was a great place. They monitor her hydration, her food, her medication. And see, those are components that play into
that's a
this
big
as well.
deal, too. It's a huge part of it.
Huge.
So it gave her more years without the steepness of the decline. Correct.
So you took my mother from sitting in her room, withdrawing from the socialization, my trying to be a good daughter and not insisting that she come out on a regular basis, to I see she probably would have declined within a year or more, maybe 2. Instead, she lived out 5 years at this community and had such a rich, full life before she started to decline. So she lived 4 years in assisted living and then went into memory care for her last year. So
she really, it extended her quality of life.
Right. But it's what families can do. They're educated. The people at Arbor Terrace Crabapple community are educated and trained on how to help make this life for someone with cognitive decline a good life.
How, again, your company is the Arbor Company, so you have lots of different facilities around.
Right, so we have
Southeast.
9 in Atlanta and 43 plus in the United States, right?
And how hard is it and how expensive is it to find the other, let's call it several dozen companies that do this as well? Talk to our audience about, because I know that our podcast audience is a little younger, right? So the audience is 30s to 50s, but then if you're in your 50s, your parents are getting into that range where things can certainly, this can be happening.
Right.
So where do you, and they're all over the country, our listeners here on Retire Sooner podcast. So how do I find, in fact, here, I don't know if you remember this happening, but a couple of years ago, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC, realized there was such an issue in finding places that they started to have these series about aging in Atlanta and how to find they started rating places to make sure that, almost like a consumer review, because it is scary to send you all these terrible thoughts and pictures of, I'm going to send mom over to this terrible place.
Right.
What are resources to find a great place wherever you live?
So this is like a whole nother podcast in itself. How do you find the place that you're going to hand over somebody who is that important in your life to, right? I was that adult child. I just assumed this place would kill my mom, and they didn't. So there are a number of things. There are resources that people don't know even exist. Again, no one's going to educate themselves on this until they have to. And I applaud you for addressing this issue that nobody really wants to know about. Adult children should educate themselves because they're going to be looking at these decisions either with their own loved ones or with themselves.
Is there a society? Is there a good resource, like a good, let's say, whether it be your company or some other company or an independent organization that rates places for this?
Yes, so you can obviously be your own advocate and look online. You can look at ratings. Of course, Google ratings are something we all look at, whether we're going to a restaurant or looking for a doctor.
So that's in this industry. That's appropriate.
Well, it's a starting place, but that's not the end all. So there are also. What I wish I had known, there are companies that will actually go out and do the legwork for you. There are referral companies. There are companies that will sit down with you and they will say, here, what are your needs? Now, there are national companies that do this on a national scale. And then there are individual companies that will do this that are more specific to, like, say, your geographic location.
And I've had a couple families utilize that kind of resource for their parents,
right?
And that's my experience in that has been pretty good,
right? And there are
even though is there a conflict though between those folks or not necessarily?
Well, so my advice to your listeners here are to get recommendations on the placement companies first. Family and friends. I always say the best recipes come from a family or friend. Right? And that's where your best recommendations come from.
What would you call that? A senior care placement company, assisted living placement company? What would you call that?
Like senior advisory companies, senior placement companies. So you can Google senior placement companies. Okay. Right. And, your listeners can reach out to me and I can give them names of people who have their own companies and larger companies that do a good job. What you don't want is somebody who's going to treat you like a number, right? And because your needs are very specific to your family and your loved one. My mother's needs were very specific to us. And that would be important to work with an advisor who hears what you have to say, takes into consideration what you're looking for and what your financial ability is.
Let's talk about the cost.
Right.
What is the range in a place? And again, these are full-time facilities. Right. What's the range?
Well, you gotta compare apples to apples here. You can't say, take a Chevy and compare it to a Mercedes, right? Because you're looking for different things.
Chevy.
Oh, will you take the Chevy? Well, I'm not going to hold that against you, but okay.
Just remember, these Chevys can be more expensive.
That's right. But you got to look at what you're getting, and that's truly what I sit down with the family and do. I educate them. I'll say, look, let's talk about what it is that each community can offer you, because they should all offer you the basics, right? Good food, an apartment, care. But let's talk about what that care looks like. Good care to one person, like, a good driving car to one person is going to be completely different to another. So you really need to be a conscientious consumer when you're looking at a place, and you have to really ask those tough questions. I give my families a list of questions that I put together for another family member years ago who said, hey, I don't even know what I'm looking for, and what should I look for, and what kind of questions should I ask? And I said, okay, this is what you need. And he was a friend, so I did a very unbiased list of questions. But you should look into those communities and see if they really are a true fit. And the cost range in an assisted living community from like $3,000 up to $6,000. And some places are all inclusive. Some places the cost of care is broken down.
So 3 to 6, and then
in assisted living, and
and
in memory care, I would say the cost ranges from like $5,500 up to $7,500. Okay. And again, you're going to have some that are more, but you really should look at is that company training the people who are going to be working with my loved one?
So on the high end, you're talking about. I had a call actually on Money Matters on WSB Radio pretty recently. There's a client not a client. It's a caller that was trying to get help on figuring out how to most effectively help his mom and utilize her assets to pay for assisted living. It was about $6,000. So, but again, that's a pretty higher end facility. Is that correct? at least in the Southeast.
It's probably
Maybe in
not.
New York, is it
65 No, New York is crazy more expensive.
15,000 a month?
Yeah, I have people moving their loved ones from New York because we're so much more
Affordable down here. Yeah.
for their budgets. And you're talking about, I hear this on a regular basis. The facility is half of yours is, and it costs twice as much. So it's going to be comparable to what the cost of living is in these cities.
So if you're in the Northeast or in, let's say, California, it could be 10 to 12,000
it
a
could
month.
be,
Okay.
right. Yep.
Let me ask this. I'll end on let's say, a sad note.
Oh, no, let's not do
No,
that. Let's
no.
end on a happy note.
Okay, then I have to ask you other question after this then. But how do you deal? This is one thing that I've always struggled with because my Lynn's aunt went through. None of these stories are typical, but just a sad. The story was sad, right? The decline was pretty quick. Facility and doesn't her aunt didn't remember people after a year or two and doesn't remember anybody. How do you deal? But yet she lived a very, very long period of time. And that we hear those stories all the time. It's like our loved one doesn't remember us, or maybe only remembers one person, but they might live for years.
Mm-hmm.
How do people deal with the loss of just, I've lost you emotionally. You're here physically, but you're really, there's no memory of any of our memories together.
Wow. So I also teach families on how to live well with dementia. And that, I can't tell you the tears that I've seen come forth when they realize that what they're doing is not the best way to do it. But probably if I had to tell them one thing, you're grieving. I'm sitting here looking at you, Wes, and the shell, and if you were my husband, this is a man that I've loved, and this is somebody I've lived with all these years. And I still see you, Wes, but the person I'm interacting with is not you. So families have to grieve while that loved one is still alive. That is such a hard thing to do. It's like grieving and yet interacting and living with that person at the same time. So I tell families this one piece of advice. If I can get this through their heads, it makes that journey a little bit easier, is don't keep trying to bring that person to where you are. Go to where that person is, wherever they are in that moment. If in the morning, Wes, you are yourself, but in the afternoon, you have a more difficult time, you're experiencing maybe sundowning, I need to come to you. The frustration, the anxiety, and the difficult parts of this journey is that the families keep trying to keep that loved one where they are. They're trying to
go meet them where
they are. So
where they have arrived.
Absolutely. So if they're living 20 years ago, be in that moment with them. That's their moment. That's their present. If they don't know who you are, then go to where they think or who they think you are. And that visit can be a good visit based upon, you meeting them where they are. Trying to pull that loved one into, wait, don't you remember me, Mom? Come on. You remember that vacation we took? Or no, you love broccoli. You have always eaten broccoli. That's so stressful for both parties. It makes for
it's natural human reaction, but it doesn't work.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. If I saw you on the street, I'd say, Wes, you remember me, don't you?
Me? Yeah.
First words that come out of your mouth, right?
Yeah.
But you have to retrain yourself, and then you have to start going to that grieving process. The families who do it well, and it's a difficult thing. It's not like, there's a good thing and a bad thing, but the families who do this well are the ones who are willing to get support. Don't disregard the value of a good support team, a good support group. My God, just sitting around talking to people who are going through the same thing you're going, it's like life-saving. It can get you through another week. There are good, solid support groups out there. Don't devalue information and knowledge and learning how to recreate that relationship. This is not the same person that you've had that relationship with.
What about their quality? Maybe this is, does this population suffer? Is their life terrible, or them not remembering is it worse on us than it is on them? Or are there other things that we look at that we don't? It sounds like there's so much we don't understand. Like, or we then that's why this education, I think, has been so helpful on this podcast, is that the more we can understand for your example of taking somebody through the hearing, you called it an opportunity to understand hearing, a little bit of a visual impairment. Is it for your mother, for any of our family members that are going through this, are they suffering too, Anne?
I wish I could answer that I wish I could answer that because I haven't been in those shoes. There's a group, and I'm going to have to get back with you on the name of that group, Voices of Dementia, where they actually interview people who are going down this journey before they're at a place where, they are not able to communicate well. That is so eye-opening to be able to hear from a first-person basis what they're experiencing. So I can just relate to you what it's like having worked with people, having lived with someone like this. I think if you have good care and you try to learn what it is that they're experiencing, again, understanding it from their point of view. When you said, yeah, there's some visual impairment, well, it's there's significant visual impairment. They lose all their peripheral vision. Most forms of dementia, you have monocular or binocular vision. If you don't know what that's like, walk around with 2 toilet paper rolls up to your eye for just an hour and see how difficult it is just to manage an hour of your life. Now they're managing their whole days. So every single aspect of what this disease does to a person affects them. Is it difficult for them? Are they in pain? Well, their body starts to shut down as their brain is not able to, manage those functions. So they're experiencing something as simple as is not being able to walk well. Well, people say, well, why are they having physical impairment? I'm going, okay, so the part of your brain that unconsciously says, hey, your right foot goes up and then your left foot goes next, your right foot, left foot, that starts to go away. So you may start to lean forward to walk, but your brain is not able to tell your feet to walk forward like it did before.
And that's
so
how we
fall.
have so many falls.
Right.
Yeah.
There's so many little parts of this that people don't understand. So again, families need to get educated on what it is their loved one is totally experiencing. Educate yourself, not just on the fact that they can't remember your name, but their bodies are transforming and they're shutting down.
And I think maybe to end this on a positive note is that if you do, as I think about 2 scenarios, one scenario, we deny it, we can't, the family member, the loved one is not receptive, and there's not as much we can do, and they enter a world that is quickly becomes really difficult for them to navigate, and that seems, let's call it really painful or even worse than just facing it, understanding it, getting educated to your point, and then putting your loved one in a place that is accommodating to that, to lessen the difficulty of it, does seem to me as positive of an outcome as we can have in the world we live in today.
Yes, I think the positive note is that you're not alone. If you choose to go down the route of putting your loved one in a community that's trained well to manage this disease, a memory care community, then guess what you get to be now? Guess what I became? I became my mother's daughter again. The few years that she had left, I was able to be her daughter. Do you know how rich of a gift that was that I received that I didn't even know that I needed? Families can become families instead of being the nurse and the med tech and the caretaker and the doctor and oh my God, you are carrying so many jobs on your shoulders, and your mom needs you to be her daughter and you need her to be your mom for as long as you can. So the positive note here, and I'm a very positive person, is we're all aging. We're all going to end up in the same place, right? All of us are going to be there, take different roads to get to the same spot. Some of us have more challenges thrown at us and are offered more opportunities to carry heavier burdens. I think information always gives us a piece, or can if we allow it, and how we use that information and the tools that are out there. Don't turn a blind eye to the things that can help make this journey easier for you. And thank goodness we're in a place now where there are tools and there is work being done and research, and there are people who say, yes, I understand this disease and I'm here to help you understand it as well.